The morning light spilled softly over Portland, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a small flicker of hope. My daughter, Maddie, sat beside me in the passenger seat, swinging her legs, her unicorn backpack snug against her chest. I stole a quick glance at her and smiled. Today mattered. Today could change everything. I had saved up for this interview, rehearsed my answers in the car, and imagined the possibilities. Maybe finally, just maybe, we could escape the endless cycle of late bills and night shifts. I dropped Maddie off at school, waving as she ran inside, and headed across town. The streets were quiet, almost peaceful, until that peace shattered with a screech of tires. A black car spun wildly, slamming into the concrete barrier. Flames erupted from the hood, black smoke curling toward the sky. Time froze for a heartbeat. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. Through the chaos, I caught Maddie's voice trembling beside me. "Dad, someone's inside." I didn't think. I ran. The heat hit me like a wall. Smoke clawed at my lungs and glass cut into my arms as I forced open the door. Inside, a woman in a crisp suit sat frozen, her blue eyes wide, a streak of blood running down her temple. "Stay here, Maddie," I called without hesitation. Every ounce of fear vanished, replaced by the raw instinct to save her. "Look at me," I urged, gripping her shoulders. "Your story isn't over. Fight. You have to fight." She whispered, weak, "Please, just go." "Not without you," I growled, pulling at the jammed door. Smoke burned my lungs, but I refused to stop. With a final heave, I freed her from the seatbelt. "Push with your feet when I pull," I instructed. She nodded, and together we tumbled onto the asphalt just as the flames swallowed the car. Her hands trembled in mine as sirens approached. I dragged her farther from the fire, my chest heaving, sweat and blood mingling on my torn shirt. People stood at a distance, filming, whispering. Maddie's small hand squeezed mine as she watched from the curb. I had saved a life, but my interview, my chance at a better future, was gone. That night, our apartment was quiet, except for Maddie's colored pencils scratching across a page. I stitched my arm with a cheap sewing kit, the pain sharp but bearable. Maddie looked up, worried. "Does it hurt, Dad?" I pressed my lips together. "Only when I think about it." She handed me a drawing, a superhero version of me pulling a woman from fire, a yellow sun in the corner. "For your new office," she said simply. I smiled, tapped it to the fridge next to the overdue bill, and didn't tell her the job was already gone. Across town, in a glass tower, she couldn't sleep. The cut on her temple had healed, but his words echoed in her mind. "Your story isn't over." She watched shaky cell phone footage of the freeway fire again and again. Dozens of angles, dozens of people calling him a hero, but all she noticed was him, his eyes, his hands, the way he risked everything without hesitation. Her name was Lauren Bennett, CEO of the company that had hired my janitorial services. A single phone call to the agency revealed it. Ethan Cole, night shift, janitor. That was me. She froze, stunned. The man who saved her life was invisible in her own company. Yet he had risked everything, and now she couldn't ignore him. Lauren's curiosity turned into determination. She studied the footage frame by frame, looking for a clue, a name, anything that could help her find the man who had changed her life in a single moment. And somewhere in Portland, I patched my own wounds, unaware that the most important encounter of my life was already set in motion. The next morning, I was back on the streets of Portland, guiding Maddie as she pedaled her little bike up and down the cracked sidewalk. The smell of grease and the hum of the city filled my lungs, grounding me in the ordinary life I knew too well. I tried to forget the fire, the screams, and the heat, but Maddie's innocent chatter kept it alive, reminding me why I did what I did. Every moment with her mattered more than anything else. Then the low thrum of helicopter blades cut through the air. At first I thought it was a news chopper, but it grew louder, heavier, until it shook the ground beneath us. Maddie froze, wide-eyed. Neighbors spilled onto their porches, shielding their faces. The black helicopter descended toward the park, dust swirling, papers and leaves flying. And then she stepped out. Lauren Bennett. Not in her blood-stained suit from the crash, but in a silk blouse and dark tailored trousers, posture perfect, expression unreadable. She walked directly toward me, past the whispering crowd, past the neighbors, until she stopped a few feet away. Maddie clung to my leg, whispering, "Dad, it's the lady from the fire." My chest tightened. "Mr. Cole," she said, calm, steady, "you saved my life." Her hand extended, holding a thick, cream-colored envelope. "This is for you, a token of my gratitude." I looked at the envelope, heavy, full of promise, but I shook my head. "I can't accept that, ma'am," I said quietly. "I did it because it was right. I didn't do it for money." For a moment, I thought I saw something crack in her armor. The CEO, who never took no for an answer, hesitated. She lowered her hand slowly, leaving the envelope suspended between us. And then, without another word, she turned and strode toward the helicopter. Its blades roared, lifting her away, leaving me holding Maddie's small hand, dust and wind whipping around us. By Monday, I was back at Bennett Logistics, pushing a mop under the harsh fluorescent lights. The Apex machine loomed in the center of the warehouse, sleek, powerful, and poised to fail. Engineers argued over laptops and screens, blind to the subtle vibration I noticed at the pivot joint. No one saw it, no one listened, but I could feel it. I crouched, pulled a scrap of metal and a coil of wire from my cart, and worked quietly, methodically. By the time the night shift ended, the rattle was gone. The machine moved smoothly, silently, perfectly. I stood, wiped my hands, and returned to my mop as if nothing had happened. No one saw, no one noticed, except for Lauren, who had been watching the security footage in her office. She saw me, every motion precise, every decision quiet, efficient. The man who had saved her life had just saved her company too. The next day, a senior engineer tried to take credit. "Just a software glitch," he said confidently. But when the Apex came to life, flawless and steady, the truth was undeniable. Lauren didn't need words, the evidence spoke for itself. Later, she confronted the engineer, her voice calm but sharp. "You didn't save Apex, he did, and you lied about it. You're done." Her gaze shifted to me, and for the first time I felt seen, not as a janitor, not as a nobody, but as a man whose hands, whose mind, and whose courage mattered. She came to me in the break room that evening. "You've seen what you can do. You don't belong on this shift. You belong in R&D." I froze. "Ma'am, I don't have a degree. I've never finished college." "I have plenty of degrees," she said, her tone softening but firm. "What I don't have is someone who sees what others can't. That's why I need you." Her words hovered in the air, heavy and impossible to ignore. I remembered Maddie's crayon drawing, the superhero on the fridge, and slowly I nodded. "I'll try." By Monday morning, I walked into the R&D lab, my hands calloused, my flannel shirt still worn. Engineers whispered behind their hands, pointing, but Lauren silenced them with a glance. "This is Ethan Cole, our newest innovation specialist. Treat him as any other member of this team." The first test came immediately. A sleek delivery drone, the Sparrow, had been crashing repeatedly, overheating despite every software patch and redesign. Engineers debated endlessly. I circled the drone, studying its lines, its wires. The answer came to me like it had a voice. I said quietly, "The wires are too tight. Give them space. The overheating will stop." Minutes later, it worked. The Sparrow flew perfectly, longer and steadier than ever. Whispers of doubt turned into murmurs of respect. I stood back, letting the engineers absorb the lesson, glancing through the glass wall. Lauren watched me, not as a janitor, not as a nobody, but as a man whose hands, whose mind, and whose courage mattered. And for the first time, I allowed myself to believe that maybe I could do this. The weeks that followed were a blur of new experiences and small victories. I had a desk now, not a mop bucket. Engineers who once whispered behind my back now leaned over my sketches, asking questions, eager for my input. Lauren was always nearby, sometimes in her glass office, sometimes walking past my workstation, her sharp blue eyes softening whenever she saw me guiding a young engineer through a problem. I was learning quickly, but the truth was, I was learning more about her than about machines. Outside the lab, life was shifting too. Lauren began showing up in our small apartment sometimes after work. She would sit at the wobbly kitchen table as Maddie chattered about school, her crayon drawings scattered across the table. She laughed more freely than I had ever heard her laugh in the boardroom. On weekends, she even joined us for pancakes, helping Maddie with her homework. Maddie, in her innocent way, had begun calling Lauren something I never expected: sadness repair lady. Lauren had fixed broken machines, yes, but in Maddie's eyes, she was fixing the parts of life that felt heavy or sad. One evening, Lauren stayed after work to help me with a design. The lab was quiet, only the hum of machines in the background. We worked side by side, hands sometimes brushing, a warmth spreading between us neither of us admitted. Maddie had gone to bed, leaving just the two of us. I glanced at her, her hair catching the dim light of the lab, and realized how much I trusted her, how much I wanted her near, not just for the work, but for everything. For a while, life felt like it was finally settling. I could breathe. I had a purpose beyond survival. Lauren had a softer side I never thought existed. Maddie's laughter filled the spaces in between. I was learning that family didn't have to be born. It could be built, slowly, with courage, trust, and small, steady acts of love. But peace has a way of inviting shadows. One night, I returned home to find our apartment door ajar. My stomach dropped. Everything seemed in place at first, Maddie's toys, the fridge, the old TV, but then I noticed it. My notebook, the one filled with sketches, designs, and ideas I'd poured every quiet hour into, was gone. And lying in the center of the kitchen table was a single black feather, slick, cold, deliberate. I knew immediately who it belonged to, the name Lauren had whispered only once: Victor Hale. My mind raced. Whoever had taken my notebook wasn't just after designs, they were after me, and through me, everything Lauren had built without him. I clenched my fist around the feather. I don't get to erase me. He doesn't get to erase us. Lauren nodded, fear and determination mixing in her eyes. We both knew the shadows had arrived, and this time there would be no running. Together, we devised a plan. Hale would strike in secret, so we would make the world watch. We announced the grand unveiling of the GN1 navigation system, a project impossible to ignore. Every press invitation, every investor was part of the trap. And while Lauren handled the spotlight, I prepared a silent army of Sparrow drones, rigged with cameras and backup power, ready to catch him in the act. The night of the unveiling arrived. The conference hall pulsed with anticipation. Spotlights danced across the stage as Lauren welcomed the crowd. The drones sat in shadows, waiting. Just as the main drone was about to rise, the lights flickered violently and died. The audience gasped. Somewhere in the dark, Hale thought he had the advantage. But then a dozen red lights snapped on. The drones hummed to life, streaming their footage to the giant screen behind the stage. There he was, Victor Hale, caught in the rafters, tools in hand, caught red-handed. The crowd erupted, half in shock, half in awe. Lauren's voice rang out steady, calm. It seems we have a technical difficulty, or perhaps evidence of one. Hale's empire began crumbling that night. Schematics, proof, and the stolen work of Daniel Bennett were displayed on the screens, exposing the theft that had built his fortune. The world watched as his lies fell apart and justice was finally served. From the wings, I watched Lauren, her eyes finding mine. Without words, we understood. This wasn't just a victory for Bennett Logistics. It was proof that courage, integrity, and seeing value where others overlooked it could change everything. And for a while, I didn't just feel like a janitor or a single dad scraping by. I felt like someone who mattered, not just to Lauren, but to the future we were building together. Months passed, and the storm that Victor Hale had stirred finally settled. His empire collapsed under the weight of exposure. His name became a cautionary tale, and for Lauren, justice was no longer a fight. It was done. For me, it was a different kind of victory. I had a place in her company, not as a janitor, but as an innovation specialist. My ideas were respected, my hands trusted, and for the first time in years, I felt seen. The Bennett and Cole Innovation Center became my world. Every morning I walked past the shiny plaque with my name etched beside Lauren's, still half in disbelief that it belonged there. Inside, engineers who once whispered now sought my thoughts, eager to see the world through my unpolished eyes. I still trusted my hands more than graphs, still spoke in plain words, but that had become my greatest strength. Lauren, too, had changed. The icy distance she carried for years had softened. She still commanded attention, made decisions with precision, but her laughter came more easily now, sometimes sparked by Maddie's wild stories or by small jokes I let slip when I thought no one was watching. I saw her smile without calculation, her eyes light with something other than strategy and power. Home was no longer just a small apartment. Lauren began joining us there more often. The apartment, once cramped and quiet, now rang with laughter, the smell of pancakes, and the crayon-covered chaos of Maddie's imagination. She fit into our world as naturally as we fit into hers, the three of us forming a life that neither wealth nor title could define. One evening we stood together by the window of the Innovation Center, watching Portland stretch out beneath us. Maddie pressed her nose to the glass, pointing out landmarks with delight. Lauren stood beside me, her hand brushing against mine. "Do you ever think about that day on the freeway?" she asked softly. I nodded, remembering the heat, the flames, the impossible choice. "Every day," I admitted. "It feels like everything started there." Lauren turned her gaze back to the city lights, quiet for a moment. Then she reached out, her fingers lacing with mine. It was tentative, but certain, a silent promise of connection. Behind us, Maddie's grin was wide and unburdened. "I knew it," she said simply. "I knew we were supposed to be a family." I bent down, pulling her into my arms, my voice thick with emotion. "Yeah, kiddo, you were right." I looked at Lauren, and in her eyes I saw the light of someone who had finally found a place to rest. From the flames of a wrecked car on the freeway to the quiet hum of a lab that carried both our names, we had traveled farther than any of us could have imagined. We had fought for justice, for life, and for love. Now, standing together, the three of us were more than a chance encounter or a rescue. We were a family built from courage, trust, and the quiet strength of seeing what truly mattered. The CEO, the janitor turned inventor, and the little girl with the imagination to see heroes in ordinary people, all of us had found a place where we belonged. And as Portland's light sparkled beneath us, I knew that no matter what challenges came next, we would face them together. Our story wasn't about titles, money, or power. It was about integrity, bravery, and the quiet courage to save, protect, and love. From the edge of the freeway flames to the heights of glass towers, we had discovered something far greater than success. We had discovered each other. And in that moment, I realized life's greatest reward isn't wealth or recognition, it's choosing what's right, standing together, and building a home in hearts, not in buildings.